Today I want to show you how to bake some very famous and delicious German Christmas cookies. They are called Zimtsterne, which can be translated to cinnamon stars. Well, I used to buy my cinnamon stars at the grocery and they came in packages like this. And they're good, they're nice, they're okay. But then I baked my first made from scratch cinnamon stars and they were so much better. So I really recommend trying this recipe, you will love it. For the ingredients, you need 390 grams of sugar. You also need 3 eggs for the dough and 2 eggs for the royal icing. You will also need about 250 grams of confectioner's sugar or powder sugar. Optional, you can use the zest of 1 lemon. And you will also need some almond flour. So there is no wheat flour in this recipe, which makes it just perfect for people who are allergic or sensitive to gluten. And I have a very fine and nice almond flour here that is completely white. But if you do not get that in your area, it doesn't matter. If you get this kind of almond flour, this is just as good. They call it almond meal. I don't know if there's any difference in the grinding. I don't know. This is actually more like the almond flour that we get in Germany. So either way, it will work. You will also need some cinnamon, and I want to really address something here about cinnamon. When it comes to cinnamon, there are 2 different kinds of cinnamon. The one kind that you usually get at the grocery is the Cassia cinnamon, and that cinnamon is basically everywhere and in everything that you buy that has a cinnamon in it. It is a cheaper version, and this cheaper version is not poisonous or something if you eat it in moderate amounts. They said it should be definitely less than a teaspoon per day. I would even, think about less than half a teaspoon. The thing with the Cassia cinnamon is that it contains coumarin, and coumarin can damage your liver, and once your liver is damaged there's no help at all and it will end very badly. I have unfortunately seen that in my own family. My mother-in-law, she had read in one of her tabloids that eating cinnamon is good for lowering blood pressure and blood sugar, so she decided to have a teaspoon of cinnamon in the morning in her yogurt and the same in the evening, and that ultimately led to liver damage, and 2 years later she died due to the complications of that. So that was very sad, and that's why it's so important for me to bring out this message to really be careful with cinnamon. And if you want to be on the very safe side, use the silent cinnamon. It is not easy to get at the grocery. They have some cinnamons that sounds like silent cinnamon, but unless it's really written on it Ceylon cinnamon, it's not the real deal. So I had to order this actually. They had the same brand with the cinnamon in my grocery, but it wasn't the Ceylon one, so don't let them trick you into anything else. This is the safe one. It doesn't have the coumarin. And it's especially what I'm worried about, the children. If children eat cinnamon stars, they will love it like everyone else and they want to have more and more. And if you're using the regular, cheaper version of the cinnamon, it might happen that they have too much of that. I don't know any case in Germany where that happened, but I'm honestly a little bit concerned. So especially for children, if you use the regular cinnamon that is not from Ceylon, then please limit the cinnamon stars for little children to 2 to 3 per day, just to be on the safe side, okay? I've measured here 400 grams of almond flour, and I will add 12 grams of cinnamon now. Smells really, really good. Still a little. Okay. And I will also add some of the lemon zest. This is of course an organic lemon. Okay. Also I'm adding the sugar. I'm stirring this a little bit. Okay, and now I'm adding the eggs, and I only need the egg whites. I will collect the egg yolks. I will need them for a different recipe. I'm baking some more cookies today. So only the egg whites go into the dough. And if you are not really someone who is good with this whole egg white thing and the separation of these two, then you definitely shouldn't do it on top of the dough, but I'm doing this quite often. I put the egg yolks into the fridge, and now I'm using my hands to mix this all together. So it's a little bit messy at the beginning, but it's not too bad. If you don't like that, you can of course use a mixer for that. So as you see, I kind of grab this and mash it together. So it gives you a very good comprehension of the consistency of the dough. It doesn't take too long. It goes actually pretty fast to mix this all together. So you can see it's already kind of sticky, and the lumps become larger. So I can already shape it in some way. And now I can take my second hand and press this together. I can smell the lemon zest and the cinnamon both together, and it smells fantastic. Yeah, and you see, there's no cut in this scene, so this is really how fast it goes. And of course I would love to go ahead and now bake my cookies, but the thing about cinnamon cookies is that they need some resting time, several times actually. And so the first resting time has to be at least 4 to 6 hours. Better is if you have this rested overnight, which is what I will be doing here. I will put it into the fridge overnight and then continue with this recipe tomorrow, okay? So I want to show you how I store this in the fridge. Most people will probably use some of their cling wrap. I really try to avoid cling wrap just to keep this planet clean. What I'm doing is this. I have my beeswax paper here, and I'm planning on making a video about how to make beeswax paper yourself, which is pretty easy. This is a store-bought one though. Okay, so, and I try to give my dough already a little bit of a rectangle shape here. Move this a little. And I rub this in just like that, so it won't dry out. And then I put it into one of my silicone bags. And I close the bag. Just like that. It's a little bit difficult with my sticky fingers right now. All right. Okay, so this is now closed and will go into the fridge, and I created no trash with this, which is the goal for me always when I'm cooking. Now it is time to continue with my cinnamon stars. So this has been in the fridge overnight, and you can see that the dough has become much darker because the cinnamon reacted with the liquid in this dough, and it's not as soft as it was before, so which makes it easier for me to roll it out in a little bit. But first, before I roll this out, I want to prepare the royal icing. So I put this aside. So for the royal icing, you could just use 2 egg whites and 250 grams of confectioner sugar or powder sugar. Sometimes you have larger eggs and sometimes you have smaller eggs, and that can affect your royal icing. So if you want it to be really perfect, you should measure the weight of your egg whites and then take 5 times that weight for the powdered sugar. So I want to show you how to do that. So, oops. So I have my scale here and I turn it on. And I'll take the first egg and put the egg yolks in here. Egg whites, not the egg yolks. Okay. All right, so I have 74 grams of egg whites here. And this means that I need 370 grams of powdered sugar. So definitely more than in the recipe. And that's why I prefer to always weigh my egg whites so that my royal icing is working just as I need it. Okay, and now I will beat my egg whites until they are very fluffy, and then I will add the confectioner's sugar. So let me show you, you don't want to overbeat your egg whites, so this is what it looks like. They're nice and shiny, and little by little I will now add the confectioner's sugar to this and mix it in. So let me see if I can show you. This is very nice. It's not too soft and not too dense. It has to stay on the dough. So that's just what I want. Now it's time to roll out my dough. Alright, so as you can see, I'm using a smaller board today because this has to go into the freezer after I rolled it out. And my large pastry board, of course, wouldn't fit into my freezer, so I have to settle for a smaller one. I will probably have to use 2 of these boards. However, I will just cut this a little bit and see how much I can get onto this board. So this is quite easy to roll, as you can see. It's still slightly sticky, so I'm using some of my almond flour to put it on the board and some also on the dough. Okay, so, and some people are using their star cookie cutter now and just make some of these stars and then put on the royal icing. I do it a little bit different, so I put on the royal icing completely on the dough because that's much easier. The downside to this technique is that this now has to go into the fridge for 2 hours before I can cut the cookies. But I think the outcome is much better if you do it this way, and that's why I'm willing to spend this extra time of waiting. So I want this to be as even as possible. And it shouldn't be too thick, so don't make an extra inch or something just from glazing. So this is what it's supposed to be like. Yeah, so, and you can see this is very nice and even, and this goes into the freezer now for 2 hours. My dough has been in the fridge for 2 hours now, and it's time to cut the stars. So I have this little star cookie cutter. In Germany there are certain cookie cutters especially for these kind of cookies, and you can kind of expand them to open them up so that the stars get out of that. I don't have that here. I have to work with this one. Makes it a little bit harder, but still possible. So first I have to dip this into some warm water, and I don't want it to drip, I just want it to be wet so I can remove the star a little easier. And then I cut my cookie. Okay, and should have sticked to my cookie cutter, but it didn't. So this one's a fail, and I think I know why. The dough is sticking a little bit too much to the board. I'm usually using a plastic board, but I wanted it to look nice on the video, so that's why I choose the wooden board. Anyway, let's give it another try. There you go. So, if I get this out like this, I want to get this out of the cookie cutter. For that, I just knock a little bit on the surface, which loosens it, and can put it on my baking sheet. Okay, let's try the next one. There we go. You can see here how it comes out. And this way you really get perfectly shaped and glazed cinnamon stars. So So now you're probably wondering what I'm going to do with all these scraps that I have here. Well, there are two options. I could cut them into smaller, nice pieces and just continue with them as if there were stars and eat them like little bites. But I don't have to do that. I can actually mash this all together and add some more almond flour and put it back in the freezer after rolling it out again. And I still have some of the royal icing, so this is basically something to start over and become a new dough. So this is gonna be sticky. And you probably remember that we started with some egg whites at the beginning, and some people, they don't just use the egg whites as they come out of the eggs, they just beat them before that and basically make a royal icing, then add part of that royal icing to the dough and leave the rest for the icing on top. I sometimes do it like that, but I didn't want it to make too weird, because sometimes if you're not using enough of the royal icing in the dough or too much, then the dough will be not just right as you want it. So I felt like this was easier to measure and to explain. Quite sticky. So I will have to knead this now, roll it out, put some icing on top, freeze it again, and then start over. And in the meantime, what my stars are doing is I do not put them in the oven yet. So you might think, wow, this takes forever. It does. These cinnamon stars have to dry now for 2 hours, and then I will put them into the oven. But in the end of the day, I will have, yeah, probably several baking sheets of these wonderful and delicious cinnamon stars. And I haven't met anyone who wouldn't like them. Okay, I continue to do this and see you in a little bit. Now 2 hours later, my cinnamon stars have dried and I can touch them. The royal icing is kind of hard. They have to go into the oven now. I'm preheating currently my oven to 390 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 200 degrees Celsius. And I will bake them for about 8 minutes. The way how to know if your cinnamon stars are ready to be taken out of the oven is if you can lift one of these cinnamon stars from the baking sheet and it's not sticking to it anymore, then it's time to really take them out. Also make sure that the glazing is not getting brown in the oven, so that would also be a sign that they are in there for too long if the royal icing turns a little bit brownish. And here is my first batch already, and you can see I can lift it from the baking sheet. They didn't even need 8 minutes, it was more like 4 minutes. I believe my recipe has a little bit of a too high temperature. Also, I would recommend baking these on a lower baking rack. The middle rack is too high. They turn brown on the top too fast. Yeah, and this is a little bit of a complicated recipe in terms of waiting times, but other than that it's quite easy and it's totally worth it. They taste fantastic and they are something I wouldn't want to miss at Christmas time. I hope you like this, I hope you like the cookies, and thanks for watching. I hope you're gonna watch my next video.